The last time you guys saw this bike, it was a broken frame. I repaired the damaged carbon and then I gave it a high-end paint job. I wanted something bold and something modern, and I think I got it. In today's video, I'm going to show you all the steps to giving your bike a high-end paint job. Something that looks professional and something you'll be proud of. If that interests you, let's get started. There are 5 steps that we'll use in this process. I'll go into each in greater detail in a moment. I've added chapters to this video so you can skip around if you want. We'll need to prep the frame, prime over any defects in the paint, apply a color coat, apply a clear coat, and then polish out any defects. Let's start first by prepping the frame and getting it ready for primer. If you've ever painted something and not done a lick of prep work, you know that the paint doesn't stick well. Gloss is the enemy of adhesion, so we've got to remove all the gloss from this frame so the new paint will stick. I use 400 grit sandpaper to sand the frame. It's coarse enough that the new paint will adhere well, but not so coarse that we get sanding marks. If your bike has a factory finish and it's in good shape, don't strip that paint off and don't sand down to the bare material. That factory applied finish is the perfect primer for the job. Once you have the frame sanded, wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol. This will remove any surface contaminants and should help prevent paint defects. If you've got spots where you sanded through the paint and got down to the bare frame, or if you've done repair like I did, it's a good idea to spray those with a coat of primer before you do the paint work. I'm using an automotive grade filler primer to prime the repairs on the frame. This is a 2-part epoxy primer. It's made by SprayMax. When you use this, you have to be really careful to make sure it's well mixed. Set a timer, this is important. Shake the can for 2 minutes, then activate it, pop the cartridge inside so that the 2 parts can mix, and then shake it for another 2 minutes. Don't skip this step. Nothing will ruin your paint job faster than epoxy primer that doesn't cure. This primer comes in a cute little spray can, but don't let that fool you. It's the same stuff that you would spray in a gun at a body shop. It needs to be taken seriously. It's a professional product and it requires professional safety equipment. We'll talk about more what I use to protect myself a little bit later in the video. I'm only priming the areas that I repaired, only the areas that actually need primer. This primer is expensive, and if I were to prime the whole frame, it would cost me more money, it would be more time in sanding, and there would really be no benefit. Set up the frame outside where you've got good access and give it a coat of primer. This is a filler primer. It's designed to fill in defects, so apply a heavy coat. You want it to go on thick enough that it will fill in those defects. Don't worry about runs because you're going to sand it after this, so any runs that you do get, you can sand out later. Let the primer cure overnight and then wet sand it to blend it back into the paint. I use 400 grit just like we did before. Close your eyes and run your hand along the primer after you've sanded it. If you can fill any high spots, you'll be able to see those after it's painted. Sand a little bit more. If it's smooth and you can't tell where the primer ends and the paint begins, you're ready for paint. I don't like masking any more than I like sanding, but it's also important. We need to mask off any place where a part will contact the frame. It will help prevent paint damage when the bike is assembled. It also gives it a professional look. I like the paint edges to be sharp and I don't like cutting out masking tape by hand, so I use a laser cutter to cut out the mask. I don't use masking tape either. I use inexpensive automotive adhesive vinyl. This is the stuff that you would wrap a car with. I like this because it's cheap, it's thin so you don't get thick lines, and it adheres really well to the surface. This felt frame has a really nice carbon weave outside layer. Back in 2015 when this bike was made, that was all the rage. But here in 2026, it's kind of looking dated. I do want to keep that carbon weave though. I just want to use it as a background for the decals. A few years ago, Felt updated their logo and switched over to minimal branding. I want to use that same approach for the decals that I put on the frame. I drew up the new logos in Photoshop. I sent them over to the laser cutter and I cut them out of some automotive vinyl. There were a couple logos on the bike that I did like, the 5 logo and the UHP logos, so I replicated those by taking a photo and drawing them in Photoshop. Crooked decals, they drive me crazy, so I don't eyeball them when I install them. Instead, I lay out some masking tape and draw guidelines. I measure the center of the tube and mark it. I then measure the center of the decal and I do the same thing. Then to install them, I just line up those marks, make sure they're straight, and I push them in place. I'm using a 3-stage automotive finish for this frame. This uses a metallic base coat, a translucent color coat, and a clear top coat. The base coat, this is an Isuzu color called Bright Metallic Silver. And then the color coat, this is a Volkswagen color called Turmeric Yellow. The trick to getting crisp lines in your decals is to apply the first coat over top the decals really lightly. Basically, this coat seals the edge of the decal and then heavier coats won't work their way under. Once you've got the decals sprayed in, apply a good consistent coat of the base metallic color. We're looking for a good consistent color here because this coat will show through. You'll ultimately be able to see it through the color coat. Let the metallic base coat flash for about 10 minutes and then apply your color coat. Just like the base coat, you want a good consistent finish. You want the paint to be an even thickness all the way across the frame. If it's heavy in spots and thin in other spots, because this coat is translucent, you'll have different colors across the frame. It'll stand out once the paint job is finished. When you're happy with the paint, wait about 10 minutes, then pull off the decals. Fresh paint may peel if allowed to cure too long. You want to remove the decals as soon as possible. I use a pick, I lift off a corner, and then I peel off the decal at a sharp angle. Let the paint dry for another 40 minutes, then apply the clear. I'm using a 2K Glamour Clear made by SprayMax. Just like the primer, this is a 2-part paint that we will activate and mix, and then it will cure chemically. This clear coat needs to be applied heavy. It has to go on heavy enough that it smooths out. Otherwise, you'll end up with an orange peel or a dry overspray texture. Apply your first coat of clear heavy enough that it flattens out, and then let it flash for about 10 minutes before applying the next coat. It's always windy here, and I paint outside, so I get dust in the finish. If you get something in your paint, a bug, maybe a cottonwood seed, don't try and remove it. Keep applying coats over top of it. We'll sand it out later. Once you're happy with the clear, let the frame cure for several hours before handling. You can speed up the cure time by baking the frame. SprayMax recommends 60 minutes at 140 degrees. I use what I call a hot box to heat up the frame. It's a box large enough to fit the frame with a space heater at one end and a fan at the other. With this setup, I can get the frame to roughly 125 degrees. I leave the frame in the box and let it cure for a couple hours. This doesn't get hot enough to burn the cardboard, but don't leave it unattended just in case. I said we'd talk about safety later in the video, so let's talk about safety gear. When I'm spraying single stage paint, so that's the paint that is not catalyzed, I will wear a cartridge respirator. The type of cartridge you choose depends on what you're spraying. So check the material safety data sheet for your specific paint to make sure you get the right cartridge. When I'm spraying catalyzed paint, I don't rely on the cartridge respirator to protect my lungs. Instead, I use a supplied air respirator. This provides me with clean, fresh air, and I don't have to worry about cartridges filtering out vapors. I also wear a Tyvek suit and gloves. This keeps the paint, keeps those isocyanates off of my skin and out of my hair. I mostly do that so that I don't carry them into the house when I'm done painting. Do your own research and make sure you've got the right safety gear for the paint you're spraying. Don't skimp out on safety gear. This is the most important part of the entire job. Painting a frame is an easy process, but there's a lot to do. It's easy to make mistakes. I forgot to mask the rear dropouts. If I leave them like this, the axle will tear up the paint. This is an easy fix. We'll sand off the paint. I made a tool the same size as the axle nut. I cut out some sandpaper and sanded the paint. A 3/8 inch rod fit perfectly into the dropouts and ensures I sand squarely. This worked out really well. It looks a lot nicer now than it would if I had left it painted. It's important to know how to fix your mistakes when you make them. Another mistake I made, I accidentally painted over the serial number. I just forgot to mask it after I did the primer. Fortunately, it's also written in the bottom bracket shell, so it's not a big deal. Everybody gets defects in their finish, especially if they paint outside. If you have dirt in your clear or orange peel on the surface, you can fix that by sanding out the defects and polishing the frame. I start with 1000 grit and sand until the surface is smooth. I then resand it with 1500 grit and finish with 2000 grit. 2000 grit is fine enough that rubbing compound will remove the scratches. Finish by polishing the frame with a buffering compound. You can do this by hand, it just takes longer. After polishing, we're done. I let the paint cure for about a week before I put the bike together, just to make sure it's fully hard. My frame turned out great. I absolutely love this color. It looks amazing in the light. The video here, it just really doesn't capture the color. It looks so much deeper in person. I hope that your frame, that your new paint, turned out just as good as mine did. If you're interested, I'll show how I built this frame up into a nice high-end road bike in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.